Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Unreal Season 1 Episode 3. It's called Mother. So spoilers for the episode as always. And this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thanks to Board Now for picking this show. So this one is a little bit different from the first two in that Rachel spends most of the episode away from the set. She actually gets a day off. In fact, she's forced to take a day off from the boss because she is... she's underslept, she's not washing her hair, she's basically a mess, and she's told to take a day off to fix herself up and get her head in the game. So Quinn says, no, you need to go and do whatever. So we get to meet Rachel's parents, in particular her mother, obviously, given the title, and kind of find out why she is kind of the way she is and make some parallels with her, which I thought was interesting. The main thing being that we find out her mother is a therapist and that she wants to give therapy to her daughter. And she's like, hey, I want to go back to her sessions, implying that they've had sessions before. And this is clearly something that's messed Rachel up. And she thinks it's unhealthy to have your own mother as a therapist. And I'm pretty sure I tend to agree. I think that's an understandable approach, especially since she's so overbearing in the scene where they have the one-on-one conversation. It was making me think of, now I've not seen all of 6 Feet Under, but I've seen season 1, or most of season 1. And I remember the one character whose parents are like these therapists who wrote a book about their daughter. And it kind of felt this was a similar vein to that, where this mother is like so obsessed with like giving like psychiatric help to her family that it's messed up Rachel. And I think the more interesting thing about it though is, okay, yeah, you've got her like taking the check for like 20 grand to help her financial troubles out or whatever and ripping it up because she feels so manipulated and used. Because the mum basically says, I'm happy to give you the money, we can afford it, it's fine, but you have to come back and get therapy, even over the phone, like I have to give you therapy again. It kind of like, holds it over and says, this is an ultimatum, you have to do it, there's a cost to this, and the cost is that I get to be your therapist. And Rachel just like rips the check up when she gets out. So you've got the sort of the raw emotion side of that and like some of the struggles she's going through. But the more interesting thing to me is this idea that when you stop and think about it, what Rachel's mum is doing to her, or has seemingly been doing to her, is not all that dissimilar to what Rachel does to the guests on the show, right? The mum acts all high and mighty when they're having lunch or whatever, and they're outside in the patio and they're having some food and some drinks. She kind of like says, oh yeah, my friend or so and so did like a report about reality TV like you're involved in and how manipulative it is and how it ruins minds or something. Like I remember the exact phrasing she used, but she clearly starts getting to her for it, and then she's doing all this stuff, manipulating her into like getting therapy from her so she can like mold her, and we find out that she's diagnosed her daughter with several conditions over the years, ADHD, things like that, and then changed to something else, giving her multiple kinds of medication, seemingly like just being convinced her daughter's got a problem and she has to find what it is and fix it, but in a really kind of unhealthy, obsessive way, where it doesn't feel like she's being helpful so much as she's using her in some, I don't know, like it's a really enforced relationship. But I couldn't help but draw some parallels to a therapist who's overly invasive and taking kind of control of their patient's life and asserting that control over them. It's not the exact same as what Rachel does on the show, but there's definitely some parallels about messing with people's emotions and getting certain reactions out of them. So maybe you could argue it's an inverse, where Rachel's manipulating and using the information that her mum would maybe glean from a patient, but instead is using it against the people and getting things out of them that way. Almost like it's almost like, yeah, she's rebelling against her mother. Like everything her mother stands for and does with her profession, in a very unhealthy way, might I add. It's not good what she's doing to her daughter. But Rachel's kind of rebelling by inverting it to all the people that she's manipulating on the show. She's effectively still dealing with human psychology, right? That's what she's doing. That's what she's messing with constantly. And when she comes back to the show at the end of the episode and it's kind of in a mess, which I'll get to in a minute, she very, very quickly creates a scene that gives them their story to revolve the episode around. And if there's one thing I'd say against this episode is that I did kind of miss like her being there, doing more of that in little doses throughout the episode of manipulating things. But regardless, it's I think it gives us an insight into her character. I just don't think I enjoyed the scenes with the mum quite as much as I had done with like all of the stuff she was doing on the show in the last 2 episodes. I think this is probably my least favorite of the 3 episodes, but it does offer something new to the character and does give us some more stuff to think about. The show itself and what's going on. I mean, obviously Rachel's there at the start and kind of runs into what's his name, Adam, the suitor, the bachelor. He's once again he's with the Latin American contestant. Her name is Grace, and she's seemingly giving him a blowjob behind some stuff in one of the trucks. There's kind of this a vibe of like, oh, you kind of have to stop this. You're supposed to not supposed to like get your whistle wet until after the whole picking the wife thing. It's kind of the point of the show. And one of the big subjects that comes up throughout this episode is this idea that the quote unquote sluts never make it to the end, right? Because they're not wife material. They always get shafted out of the show. And there's some manipulation throughout this episode from some of the others, namely Shia, who is kind of like left with the mission of like, hey, try and get your girl, who I want to say her name was Maya, that like her contestant. You want to get Maya sort of more involved, get her moving towards. She's got wife material, get her acting out. So the premise of their episode, if you will, of this show is that there's going to be like a cocktail party, and then after that cocktail party, there's going to be like a more private thing with just 3 of the girls, and then there'll be like a full day date with someone. And this doesn't happen by the end of the episode. We probably won't even see this. This will probably just be between episodes. But then there'll be one girl who gets to spend the whole day with Adam, and it'll be a whole thing. But the twist to it is that Adam's not the one picking any of these girls for this particular thing. His friend is flown in from England. He is going to pick the 3 girls for the sort of more private thing, and he's going to be there for all this as well. And then he'll pick the girl for the whole day thing. And that's kind of like our big sort of hook for this episode, is that you've got this extra element in someone who, quite frankly, makes Adam seem like a good guy by the end of the episode, because he is much worse. For most of the episode, he's just a bit of a douchebag, to be honest. He's loud, he's obnoxious. Then it gets a bit darker later on when he seemingly has sexually assaulted someone. Maya does not confirm this. She gets very aggressive when she's even asked if something like that happened and says, stop making a big deal out of it. Whether that develops into more later, I'm not sure. But it definitely, obviously, paints a bit of a picture over this episode. And at least their confrontation between Adam and I think his name is Roger. I can't remember the guy's name, but the friend's name, who basically just like shrugs it off. Like Adam looks actually, I mean, he kind of looks embarrassed even earlier on when he's just drinking and flirting with the girls, and he feels embarrassed by that. But after this, he confronts him and says, "What did you do?" And he says something like really disgusting, like, "Oh, like once they don't need to be on their legs for it," right? Implying it doesn't matter if she was so drunk she couldn't walk. That's fine to him, and just kind of shrugs it off and does not take it seriously. Results in a couple of punches, partly also because Adam's dad kind of sent him to get him back. He's lucky he's not taking over his identity and killing him. That's a reference to Ripley, which I'm also reviewing for a patron right now. But some of the stuff building up to this was good. Like it had like kind of an interesting vibe to it, where I feel bad for Shia in some ways, because Shia has had this thing where she keeps getting upstaged by Rachel at every turn, and Rachel's gone for the day, and Shia has this chance to maybe like have one of her contestants do well, and she's the one that goes to Maya and says, "Hey, you're doing great," right? We don't even hear what she says to start with. We cut into the scene and it's already like after the like start of the conversation. So we come in and we just hear Maya go, "Really? David said that?" And that's where the scene starts. And she explains to her that, yeah, things are going great with David. You've got a really good shot. Your wife material, blah, 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 blah. But then says, but David's not picking the girls for this next bit. That's this other character. And he's a bit of a slut. And I'm not asking you to do anything dodgy, but maybe, loosen up a little bit, maybe, act a certain way, win his favor so you're definitely picked. Gives her a bit of booze and sends her on her way. And as all these things were playing out and they're in the hot tub together and she's making her moves, she keeps smiling and making flirty comments and getting more drinks. And the entire time, the vibe I was getting from it is that I think the best friend character is starting to like want to put a move on her. And of course, that ends up what's happening. They end up going off together, and then it takes a dark turn because when they open the door, I think it's when Rachel comes back and she says, "Cut the music." Because one of the problems is that this whole private party turned into a bigger party, and they've been playing music constantly, which they rightly point out they can't use any of that footage really because it's all got copyright music all over it. They can't do anything with it. Plus, it's all making Adam look bad because he looks miserable the entire time because he's embarrassed by his friend. So they turn off the music and they hear some noises coming from the trailer nearby or whatever. And when they open the door, Rachel knocks on the door and they open it. Maya comes out and she looks upset. She looks kind of shaken up and she walks off. And it's this dour moment where like Rachel glances over to whoever else and it's all a bit of an awkward thing. And it's like, oh shit. It feels, it feels quite dark. It especially feels quite disgusting the way that this guy just kind of shrugs it off like he's not done anything wrong. It really paints this picture. It definitely does an okay job at making Adam seem like less of a prick because this is a line that he seemingly is not comfortable with. He does confront him about it and is, for all the faults he may have, and he may have many, he isn't that. So if that was one of the goals of the episode was to make us like him a little bit more, I think it probably succeeded in that. Especially since when it gets to the end of this whole thing, where his friend hands him the card with his pick for who he's to go on this date with, and it says Anna on it. It doesn't say Maya, but Adam just lies and says Maya anyway, which makes her really happy. And everyone assumed that she wouldn't be picked because of what happened with the friend. And it's like he's going out of his way to give her a win to make her feel better. So it does feel, it does sort of build up a little bit of likability in him, which is quite a feat, if nothing else. But yeah, there's some other things going on here. Like I said, Rachel, when she comes back, and Quinn's back as well. And Quinn's got a whole plot that we'll talk about. But Quinn says to Rachel, I can't use any of this footage. Where have you been? Go get me an episode. Go get something I can use. And Rachel goes to see Anna. Anna, of course, is the woman who went through everything last episode with her dad dying and been made to look crazy on TV by the end with yelling and whatnot. And there's a couple of like references to her throughout the episode that she's eaten a bit. They talk about how she's maybe vomiting after she eats to like keep her figure or whatever, or something to that effect. And Rachel comes up and sort of like basically says, how you doing? Yeah, people, like people are noticing. We're seeing it on camera. This is happening. And then basically once again orchestrates a conflict between Anna and Grace. And says basically Grace called her fat, like for lack of a better, just to explain it quickly. It was a bit more in depth than that, but that was the gist of it. And it leads to Anna going up to Grace and confronting her, right, and saying she's only where she is because she sucks cock, and it ends up into a slap fight, and the whole thing devolves into them having a cat fight, and Quinn and Rachel are sitting over on the couch watching this like two mob bosses, just kind of like, see, you're great at this, Rachel. That's the Rachel I know. You're good at this. But Rachel's obviously struggling with this idea that, I mean, this is actually one of the other things with the conversations with the mother kind of illuminated, is that back in episode 1, I said, oh, she's clearly very conflicted and maybe feels a level of guilt for what she's doing to these people. And even again in episode 2, this idea that she knows what she's doing is manipulative and wrong, and that she's really struggling with like being able to do it and how that makes her feel. The stuff with the mother in this episode kind of implied that you know what you're doing to these people and you know it's wrong, and in some level you might actually deep down like doing it, and maybe that's actually what she's struggling with, this idea of admitting that in some level she is good at this and she maybe even likes doing it, but is fighting that for whatever reason. And it maybe just sort of blaming Quinn as the monster who makes her do all these things is an easy thing to read into in the first couple of episodes because it's an easy excuse to kind of point at, but it's also convenient for her as a character to say, hey, this is my mean boss who makes me do these things. I don't want to be doing these things, but maybe deep down she actually does, and that's actually maybe what scares her about this whole thing, is that she does do this and likes it and is good at it. So, yeah, it's a very kind of powerful end. It's a funny ending, right? And it's the sort of thing where the episode was almost missing a lot of this before the ending because Rachel wasn't there, Quinn wasn't even there for a lot of the episode. I mean, she's in the episode, they both have their own plots, but their absence was a little bit felt in that main making the show portion of the episode. Actually, at one point when Rachel, before she leaves, confronts Grace about all this sneaking around with Adam, I keep forgetting his name. I keep wanting to say Jason and David. For some reason, I'm just interchanging all these generic names. But she confronts her, and I think this is the scene where we get the, hey, sluts get cut, right? they don't make it. They get washed out. It will ruin your image in terms of winning the show. And Grace gets mad and says, who you calling a slut, blah, blah, blah. And even accuses Rachel of looking at Adam like she wants him. And I don't know if we're going somewhere with that. They definitely have done a couple of moments so far where, you know, between the shower thing last episode and then here with her catching him with his knob out, literally. Yeah, they're maybe playing with these moments and situations. Perhaps when she sees Adam sticking up for someone like we saw him do here in this episode, maybe there will be something that forms there. It's kind of interesting. Also tying into this idea of her pretending that she doesn't want to be here. This ties into the other part of Rachel's plot this episode, which I've not talked about yet, is the fallout of the emails being leaked or sent out to everyone last episode, right? The roommate sending everything out. We see various crew members making fun of her, making comments, because she sent effectively love letters, but also some, I guess, I don't know, sexting emails, whatever you want to call them. But they're making fun of her for saying that she was going to do dirty things to Jeremy. Just remembered his name. But yeah, so there's a whole awkwardness around all of this, between her getting made fun of by a lot of the crew, particularly with Jeremy and his fiancée, where she clearly looks a little bit distraught. Although she's not distraught because Rachel wrote some erotic love letters once upon a time. That's actually not what's upset her. They were together at some point, and she wrote some romantic stuff. That's not really that weird or surprising, right? It's awkward to have to see it and read it and know it and have everyone else know it. But that's not necessarily anything that should upset her for what her relationship is with him now. What actually upsets her is this idea that he always talked to Rachel about running away from the show and getting a job in New York as a cinematographer or DP for an actual film director. Like, that's what he wants to actually do. And it turns out he's never said any of that to his fiancée. So she basically discovers this whole facet of his character that he's never been honest about with her, but he was honest about it with Rachel. He tries to play it off like it's not something he wants anymore, but he kind of, when she says, hey, you can move to New York, and but it has to be with me, I'll go too. And he's like, oh, you do that? And he's kind of admitting that he does kind of want to get away from this crappy reality TV show and do something that he actually dreamed of. So they've kind of made up by the end of the episode. But the other side of this is Rachel trying to apologize to him. And this idea that they always talked about leaving, by the end of the episode, or even just through the episode when we're talking about how she secretly might actually like doing this, there's this idea that she was the one who was being dishonest in those romantic conversations or emails with Jeremy. That deep down she actually does want to be here. And the final line of the episode is Quinn saying, this is home to her. And that being kind of a weird kind of thing, especially since we literally see her go home this episode and how hostile that place is and how she doesn't feel comfortable there, how she feels confronted constantly. And I'm not saying she shouldn't improve herself in some ways based on her life. It's not like she's that happy. But at the same time, she comes here and it's almost like she's been enabled in all of the worst qualities she maybe has in some ways. Not for the show, but on a human level, it's the bad quality she has. So I thought that was a really interesting thing to connect to that, like, part of the subplot, if you will. You know, the idea of the Jeremy, like, romance history stuff. I think that fed back into Rachel's plot and the idea that she actually secretly doesn't want to leave, and maybe even hasn't admitted to that to herself, that she does like being here. She does kind of live for this. Again, tying into how she feels about the whole thing in general. All that linking up is quite good writing. I thought it was really tightly done in that sense, so I can't really fault the episode. I just didn't enjoy it as much because there was less of Rachel actually mixing up with the people on the show, right? There's some of it, but there's not as much of it this time. The other subplot we have to talk about is Quinn and Chet, which is probably my least favorite of the episode by a reasonable margin, just purely because it's not something that I've been super invested in, and it's a bit on the nose at points as well. Like, I kind of liked the scene early on where Chet goes up to Anna. Again, Anna being the one whose dad died last episode, and him going up and like sort of saying, "Hey, sorry about your dad. What was he like?" And seemingly getting kind of scared because her dad was only a couple of years older than him. He's, getting concerned about his lifestyle and health and all that. He's still taking cocaine, obscene amounts. The fact that he has that little moment being scared about, oh, maybe I'm actually in danger of dying someday, and then having a heart attack while he's having sex with Quinn, felt a little bit, just a little too on the nose. Like he was thinking about this earlier in the episode, and immediately something happens that threatens his life. That I wasn't in love with that. I did appreciate the build up to that moment though, in a sense, because he comes in and basically tries to seduce Quinn, right? Tries to sort of get her into a sex situation, and she's saying no to begin with, and he's trying to convince her. And he effectively just looks at her with these big eyes, and it at least gives us this idea that on some level, even though she's told him that they're done a couple of times now, that this is clearly something that happens a lot, where he'll just give her this look and she'll fall for it, and they'll end up doing it again. And it's this cyclical thing that happens, and she gives into it anyway. But then when they're having sex, he has a heart attack, and it's a whole thing. And he ends up at the hospital. And there's even like a funny little moment where she says, "Hey, we should call your wife." And the doctor or nurse is like, "I thought you were. Okay, never mind." and walks away. That was kind of funny. Yeah, the big things here, though, is that it's revealed that his wife knows about him and Quinn. And basically says, "Look, I've got the house, I've got the money, and if he dies early, I get all that life support. And it's worth a lot because he's filthy rich. You don't get any of that, but you keep him fairly contained. He's not wandering too far by just having sex with you. So I appreciate it. It means I don't have to bother." And kind of belittles her, right? It's a really kind of, Quinn was already feeling very mixed about this last episode. So having the wife basically say, "You know what, I'm glad you're his mistress because you basically serve a purpose and you're not important," and walks away. That's it. That's the whole thing. It just kind of leads to, once again, Quinn breaking ties with him by the end of the episode. And I think that's partly why it's that. I think it's a bit repetitive from last time, but it's also the fact that Chet as a character is not that engaging to me yet. I'm curious what we'll do with him later in the season that might kind of bring more out of him. I'll like his plot a bit more, but at least as of right now, I think him and Quinn's relationship, I like Quinn as a character a lot. I think Quinn, when she's directing the show, when she's interacting with Rachel, great. I think the Quinn and Chet stuff is probably my least favorite thing in the show in general right now. It's not terrible. At least not yet. I mean, if it stays at the same quality level for a while, it might become more grating just because we keep doing it. But right now, it's just kind of whatever. So, not too bad, but still, though, there's a lot of great stuff in this episode. I still like the show a ton. I think it does flesh out Rachel's character more. The fact that I could talk about those different parts of the subplots connecting thematically, they really build this idea of questioning where she wants to be. And again, just showing once more that she is great at this, that she creates this fight scene at the end, and that's what they can revolve the entire episode around. And it has nothing to do with the girl who just got assaulted, right? It keeps her out of it almost, and a lot of the footage of her will probably not even air because they can't build a story around it now. Which maybe is a good thing in a sense. Maybe Rachel was being tactical in that way, but maybe that's giving her too much credit. I don't know. Anyway, the characters are still super fascinating. There's a lot of good things going on, and it is obviously quite funny at times. Curious to see if they build more on this Rachel Adams stuff. That could be somewhere to go, but obviously he's got a lot of potential love interest right now, so we'll see what they do with that. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this episode of Unreal. So yeah, excited for the next one. But that is the episode. Although I have been doing a thing in recent reviews where I pick a scene of the week, and I hadn't really thought about it for this one until this moment. So now I'm thinking about it. What's my scene of the episode? I think with this one, it probably is just the obvious choice, which is either Rachel coming back and seeing this party unfolding, which is all useless footage, or her actively fixing it, right? That's when the show is really firing on all cylinders, typically. It feels like a bit of an easy choice this week, but there's not like another little moment, which, typically I want to highlight something that I've not focused on too much as of yet, or want to give something else a bit more love to. I don't know if there's anything specific elsewhere that I would pick for this particular episode. So I'm going to go with the obvious thing and say Rachel coming back to see this party unfolding that she has to now fix in some way. But yeah, I mean, sometimes there'll be more concrete reasons as to why I'm picking something as the scene of the week. But I think it's that. Either that or the ending, really, with Rachel and Quinn sitting and, talking about this being home. That obviously has a big impact. I feel like the one thing I'll try and not do a lot with picking scene of the week, though, is always just pick the ending, because I feel there's a lot of episodes where the ending's kind of an easy choice. Sometimes it'll be so good that I have to pick it, but I don't think I'll try to do it too often. But anyway, that is the episode. Thank you very much for joining me. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And of course, you can get some bonuses over there and help keep everything coming. All the TV reviews, all the movie podcasts over at MailFuzz Movies. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?